everybody, and welcome to Let's Talk Assassin's Creed, your number one podcast for all things Assassin's Creed. In today's episode, I want to take a look at the Isu language, but not just, the lore behind the language, but how a group has managed to come up with a way to solve the Isu language, and also how I believe the Isu language can help the community going forward. And as you know, that there is people out there who can solve it, which are 10 times smarter than me because I tried for hours and I still can't even get one word translated. So, really glad that people out there that can do it in the community. And I'm joined by Marco from Access The Animus, the people behind solving most of the riddles.
Hey, hello everyone. Thank you for having me.
I have been dying to get you guys on board for 6 months now.
Oh, what? Really? That much?
Yeah, I'm like one of those football talent scouts. I do my podcast and I scout for guests, random people I could steal. Since I started my podcast journey, I've been inspired by the ones who came before. I've been with them since the beginning, trying to call. You
Yeah.
guys, obviously, have always been a big inspiration.
Oh,
But
man.
all the other little podcasters as well, like Visions of the Past, AC Landmarks, he's a brilliant guy. And
Oh.
Louise from the Rookery Archives, she's just fantastic to talk to. Can we blushing now?
Well, I'm super happy to be here, and it's so nice that you're mentioning so many members of the community and the contribution that they're giving. I think that to a degree we're all some sort of like inspiration to each other, because each of us are like bringing something new to the table and some new kind of content to the table. So you did great in mentioning all of those cool people.
Should we dive into the Isu language? Because I've got a really big question for you.
Oh yeah, sure.
How, on God's green earth, did you guys figure out that you could translate it? Because
Uh,
when there's languages, there's always a guide to follow, like Spanish, French, English. They all have a guide to follow. But the Isu language is just made up. How did you know there's going to be a rhyme and a reason to the letters or symbols?
the thing is, so basically, if you look at what is in the game, and in the game only, all the sentences are already translated. Like every time you find an Isu language text in the game, it is automatically translated in the files in the laptop in the modern day. So the idea that got us to see that language could have actually like a meaning and a translation and rules and everything was that luckily I had gotten the what's it called, the collector's edition for the game, and the collector's edition of the game had some Isu language wording on it, and that those words, those lines, they weren't part of what was in the game. So basically, what we did is try to understand if we could find a way to understand what was in the collector's edition of the game, and basically we had a look at the sentences and see that there were elements in common here and there. So little by little, we found that there were elements that could represent parts and chunks of the sentences. Some could be like conjunctions, like and or something like that, and some others that were that could be interpreted as word like verbs. And from that, we kind of realized, like, I had studied Latin back in the day when I was in high school, and I found some similarities. Like there are cases, like there's genitive, there are nominative, there's ablative, there are cases in the language, and there's like verbs that are put at the end of the words. And there are rules in there as well. And basically, I worked with my wife Sari, who is also part of the Access the Animus team, and we spent weeks, months, probably, as a side project because we were doing other content for ATA, and that basically when we had a first epiphany about realizing that the language was not just a sequence of symbols but actually something with rules and everything. And when we got that, it was time to like crack the puzzle. Like we understood it was a puzzle, and then we had to understand how it worked. So that's the it took us not so much to understand it was a puzzle, but to crack it, it was like weeks and months.
I will admit that blows my mind. So when I looked at the collector's edition online, I saw all these codes and lines, and I thought they were just some cheesy squiggles. So it's impressive to find out that you realised that there was a puzzle here to be solved, because the Isu language that's already been translated that I've seen, I just assumed that there was no rhyme or reason for any of the Isu language.
So yeah, it was a surprise for us as well. Like when we saw it first, especially because in the other games prior to Valhalla, the Isu language was visually represented in some of the first civilization vaults and technology. Like there were symbols appearing in Assassin's Creed Origins. In all of the vaults, there are symbols drawn on the ground or on the walls. But there were like other symbols in Brotherhood, in Unity as well. There were like symbols all across the franchise, but none of them actually had a meaning. Like they were visual representation of the language. Like they were just a way to say, hey, the Isu had a language, but there were just symbols that could not be interpreted. And it was only with Valhalla that like new symbols were introduced, and these ones actually made sense. It was very tough to understand them because they have rules. And like recently, we had an interview with Antoine Henry, who is like the associate game director at Ubisoft Singapore, that actually created the language. And he said that he actually wanted the Isu language to have a lore component to it. So it wasn't just a puzzle for fans, but it also had to have a story element to it. Like the Isu language is built this way because basically it is from this language that within Assassin's Creed, all the languages that are spoken today in all the countries of the world, like all these languages are coming from the Isu language within AC. So basically, he had to use the various languages and revert them to a sort of like proto language. And so that's why he put some of the rules that you can find still in like modern languages or like in past languages like Latin. So basically, he wanted to use rules like those so that it's not just a puzzle, but also like you really see that was like the ancestor of the current modern languages. So that's really cool, even like story wise.
I think it's also really cool because in the Assassin's Creed lore, we know after the Toba catastrophe, Isu did survive alongside humans, and they taught them as much knowledge as possible. But outside that, we don't know much. So it's really cool to have a lore incentive where possibly our language now originates from the Isu teachings, which actually does come something that Darby tweeted me recently, where I asked about sages and why he brought them to Valhalla, and he said personally he wanted to bring old concepts back instead of new concepts. So the Isu language kind of fits that sense that they're bringing the law that Isu taught humans knowledge by creating this language that has rules similar to our language.
Absolutely, absolutely, it does make sense in that regard, and it's very nice to see that happening in Valhalla, because Valhalla as a game brought a lot of concepts back from the various other games of the franchise. So it really is super interesting as a concept as well, because through this language, Darby and the writers team was able to tell some elements and like story elements and new characters as well from the Isu era, which is very dear, to, especially to the hardcore fans. There's a document in Valhalla of like it's called the Canterbury document. It's the Canterbury file, and basically that tells how the humans were engineered by the Isu. Like there was like an order of creation, like the features that the humans had to have before being created and everything like that. That's super interesting, I'd say, for fans, and conveying that through a language, a proper language, it's even more involving. It's more compelling for fans. It's not just a text file that you read. It's also you are reading the actual original language. It's so interesting in that regard.
It's also mind blowing because a game that's 14 years old, there shouldn't really be any old tricks that could be brought into light, if that makes sense.
Oh yes, yes. Like you would expect that a franchise that's been going on for so much time, that like uh, everything from the past has been already like developed, and like the stories, that kind of story has already been told. But actually, like devs have been able to bring more elements, more story elements, like with the Isu language and whatnot, that matches what has already been established from the past, which is pretty nice, especially in Valhalla's main game. And it seems like more of that will be added with the mythological expansion coming in next year, hopefully, maybe.
Before I touch on the mythological teaser for the third DLC, which I really still don't understand how people solve that. But do you think going forward that this is a process that they should adopt? They should keep using the Isu language that can be translated for whenever Isu are involved, so community members and hardcore fans have a bit more lore to bite than people who say just want to play this game for the story, if that makes sense.
I'd say yes. Yeah, yeah, it does make sense a lot. And I would hope and expect that the new teasers involving the Isu language will happen in the future, when it makes sense to have them, of course. So um, there's a new DLC involving the first civilization in 2022, and there's and right there we had like this teaser about Odin and Loki, and it was super interesting, and it got a lot of members of the fandom to try and crack that language, like that specific message. A lot of people tried to get involved in that, and it was a very fun moment um, right after E3. I would expect that to happen again. And with more and more people trying to understand the Isu language, I think it's a nice puzzle kind of thing to crack while waiting for a DLC. So it's very interesting as a promotional material. But I think that could also happen within the DLC. It could happen within the DLC, within the mythological DLC that will be released next year. If it's in the teaser, we might expect some more language to happen while we're playing. Like we have seen already a lot of language within the main game. I wouldn't be surprised to see more of that in the mythological DLC. Absolutely. And I wouldn't be surprised to see more and more members of the community to have fun with this kind of stuff. It's like, to me personally, it's incredible. Like every time trying to crack the puzzle, trying to find new rules, new words, like creating some sort of like a list of rules and like understand the vocabulary and everything. It's so stimulating, and it's interesting as well because it's kind of like cracking a puzzle, but also finding a lore meaning at the same time. Back in the day, there were a lot of puzzles in AC. Um, Most of them were for the sake of it, but sometimes they were also adding lore and story and information. For example, with um, the I'm sorry, the the cluster puzzles in Brotherhood, and there were like some codes in Revelations as well. Like there, some of those were able to convey story elements as well, and I hope that the Isu language will be able to do that as well.
And this is what actually surprised me, and goes back to E3. I watched Ubisoft Forward, I watched E3, I have watched the DLC trailer 16 times, I haven't had full blast. How on God's green earth, as I've said to all my friends, when people came forward with this analytical for this message and did you know these runes could be translated, it just blew my mind how the community was so engaging. Even I didn't know, and I had my headphones full blast, and I still can't hear a weird noise. So
Yeah,
it's mind blowing.
yeah, it was mind blowing for me as well. Like, I was like covering all the news on Access the Animus on our social media and everything, and I was so surprised to see that on Reddit, it had already been cracked like minutes after the trailer was released. Like, there was this user, I think it was called Roger Augusto, who was reporting from another user from the Joe Raptor Discord, and he had already realized that that weird noise had to be actually run through an audio spectrum analyzer. And basically, that's a tool that turns audio into a visual. And basically, you run it's like a frequency analyzer, and uh, basically that turns the sound into the Isu language. And there was like actually two Isu language sentences with their English correspondent below them, and basically through those two sentences you could understand what the sentence on the door, on the gate, in the trailer, how it could be how it could be translated. So basically, it was similar to what happened in the game. Like when you have like six sentences that are already translated, and you use them to understand what's written on the collector's edition box. In this case, we had two sentences with their translation through the spectrum analyzer, and you had to use those to understand what was written on the gate from the trailer. And that sentence was, "Mad one, what have you done?" Which is basically Loki saying something to Odin, like Odin must have done something very bad, something dangerous, or something something you wouldn't do. And maybe that's the teaser about what, like, that's what we can expect from the upcoming DLC.
I I remember after all the codes was released and all the news, I remember in the Discord group, the Mentors Guild, people was going wild about the translations, and I
Yes.
did try and translate it, but my translation was so far off. I think I got something about the hordes are coming,
Yeah.
and I was like, that's definitely not. But it kind of made me laugh that it's not perfect. It's really hard for somebody to translate it because it's such a new concept.
Oh
But
yes.
it's not disheartening to get it wrong, which is kind of cool. Like my first try, I got some about the hordes are coming, and then when I read the Mad One, what have you done? I thought maybe we get like a horde mode. Maybe when Odin stuck himself in the tree for 9 days in the
Yeah.
mythology, maybe he unlocked something in the Isu world that drove everyone mad, but because he must have got some pardon from the Capital Triad, his crime was left to be abolished. So it kind of sends you into a wild theory until the lines are corrected, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think that this kind of message, it can spark any kind of wild theory, because looking at Odin's character from the Asgard and Jotunheim arcs, and like the ending of the mythological arcs in the base game, you could really see that he's like a very selfish kind of character. He's very determined to save himself and his friends, but at the same time, he's like determined to go against the calculations that he had about his death with Ragnarok and the Toba catastrophe and everything. But he challenges destiny. He really wants to save himself and his friends. And because of that, like, he's like, to me, he's like really selfish. There are so many situations where he proves that in the main game. And so I wouldn't be surprised for any kind of deed that he could do before or after the events that we have seen in the main game. So I'm not surprised at all to see that Loki is saying, "Mad One, what you do? What have you done?" And that can spark any kind of theory. Like, Odin could have done basically anything, um, considering all the technology that the Isu had and how selfish he was. Like, it could be basically anything.
I think my theory has been I know I'm probably relying too much on Norse mythology, but seeing as how, as Zixkey pointed out in System Server, when the Isu was teaching people knowledge of Total Catastrophe, that became myth. So it is possible that every myth in human language is Isu truth, but twisted through Chinese whispers. So it got me thinking that what if there is a prophecy that uh, I forgot Fenrir was supposed to kill Odin, not the Toba
Yes.
catastrophe. That's why Odin had him killed, because I still believe that Fenrir was a supporter in the Isu human uprising, whereas
Okay.
Harvey isn't, because I don't think he's really very, because he's selfish, he just wants what he wants. He wants to cheat death. So I think with the whole war going on, he wants to stay out of it. He wants to cheat death. He wants to keep living, get as much knowledge. But Fenrir is against that because too much knowledge can make him better than the Capital Triad, which would probably throw everything into um, havoc. If you're better than the Capital Triad who's meant to protect you. So I think there was a prophecy where he tried to kill Odin and Odin killed him instead. And I think that's what Loki's referring to as the Mad One. What have you done? Like, what blood is on your hands to get the knowledge that you have gotten?
Well, that's potentially something that could have happened. Like, the Norse mythology expect, like, it says that Odin was bound to be killed and eaten, or like bitten by Fenrir during Ragnarok. What we have seen in the main game is basically up until right before or right during the Toba catastrophe during Ragnarok. So Odin has uploaded his conscience to the, let's say, to the Yggdrasil device, or like to the device that we can see in the main game, and we don't see what happens afterward. Like, there is a calculation that shows that he is eaten or like bitten by like this giant wolf that is representing Fenrir. But like, story wise, we know that he imprisoned Fenrir. Like, he Fenrir had been imprisoned through this, like, in the mythology world, is like, it's a cord. It's called Gleipnir, but of course it's something else in the Isu world. So we know that he was imprisoned, and in the modern day, Basim/Loki is trying to find him. So we don't know if Fenrir was able to get out of this prison. He might have been able to do that, and we might see this sort of like clash with Fenrir. It could be. It could actually happen. After all that Loki cared about was his son and his children. And we have seen that he especially cared about Fenrir, because he was under the threat of Havi, of Odin. So Yeah, we could see that absolutely, or we could see some events that date before what we have seen in the um in the Asgard and Jotunheim arc. For example, there are um, some dialogues in the Animus anomalies that show some of the events involving Loki and Alethea, and there are moments where like there's this moment where Loki says that he killed Odin's son Balder, and in retaliation because Odin had imprisoned Fenrir. So maybe there is a second retaliation from Odin on Loki or like his family. So we could see any of that in the upcoming DLC. Absolutely.
I'm really stoked for what we can see, and there is a lot of debate for a lot of friends, and it means nothing. But I'm hoping that the DLC may give us an answer to why Harvey and everyone who uploaded their conscience to the Tree of Life, as I'm going to call it, because my pronunciation is terrible, why they all walked out weapons drawn. I generally believe the reason they walked out weapons drawn was because I think there was somebody waiting for a fight outside. Even though the world is ending, I think some Isu may
Yeah.
have had a grudge where they think, well, just because our world's ending doesn't mean your life's been taken from me. I will have my revenge. So
Yes.
I'm hoping with Meltspine being hell, I'm hoping that maybe that is actually not the world hell, but the aftermath of the Toby catastrophe, because that would literally be hell. The whole world's burned
Oh yeah,
who
absolutely.
survived. And it'd be kind of interesting to see Odin maybe retaliating with some Isu human survivors, because I know the war was still going on up until the Toby catastrophe. And it does seem that Loki and Althea's love may not have been sanctioned by Harvey himself. I don't think he was. I don't know what the word is. Intermarriage, like different cultures.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he like Odin in the Asgard arc is surprised for it's not directly clear why. Like when he realizes that the wolf is Loki's son, he's super like he gets angry, he's very shocked. And it's not clear if he's shocked because the wolf is Loki's son and he had forbidden any kind of wolves to be in Asgard, or if because he had a child with a member of another group of the civilization that is Alethea. It's something that we kind of mentioned in our videos as well. But in any case, that's one of the reasons why Odin and Loki got to clash in the Asgard arc and in the Jotunheim arc. So it's something that we could see, and it's I agree. It's going to be interesting if we could see the aftermath after what we have seen in the Ragnarok video. There is like a part of the of the calculations said that Jotnar will stalk your streets as fire rains abound or something like that. So basically, I think they are going with weapons, like with their weapons, within their weapons against some of the Jotnars, which should be like the Greco-Roman Isu, that are some kind of like invading Asgard or something like that, and that kind of like resembles and like mirrors the Norse mythology. Basically, the final fight during Ragnarok is, if I'm not mistaken, between the Aesir and the Jotnar, um, while Ragnarok is happening and everything. So that should be something like a fight that we could see in there, but we don't know like uh, Isu wise, like first civilization wise, what actually happened after Odin and his friend uploaded their conscience. So we could see any kind of like event that is different from Norse mythology. Could be interesting to see that.
I still think with how arrogant Odin is, he even hangs out for 9 days for 9 knowledges. I think once he's got his conscience of blood, he doesn't really care. He's like, I'm not going to die, so I'll just do whatever I want.
Oh
if
yeah,
I want, if I want to go join a glorious battle for Valhalla, then I will go join in and see what happens.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like after they upload their conscience, it's like a save state in a video game. Like he could do anything. Like of course you don't know if the method could work or not, but once you uploaded your conscience, you could like it's you can see why he's like super confident while going outside of that room, because he knows that he was able to activate the seventh method, so he can go there and do whatever he wants, because now he knows that he will probably survive. He would probably reappear like millennia afterwards. So yeah, we could see him with no care and like all his selfishness, uh, um, going around and doing whatever he wants to do. But his time is very limited after uploading his conscience, because like fire will like engulf the earth. So
It'll be interesting to see, but I do think this may be all we have time for this episode. We may have deviated from language to some really cool theories,
oh
but
yes.
that's how my shows go. If there's no tangent in here, then you're doing the show wrong. So I'm really excited, and I'm really excited for the Isu language to now become a bridge for the community, because the problem with video games in the community is you're sometimes just left in the dark waiting for a bit of knowledge, whereas this Isu language seems to be a bit of fun. Even if the game isn't First Civilization related, it'd still be fun to do an Isu code for the next game as a little tease. Even if the game has only modern day Isu connections, but no Isu connections in game, it can't hurt to do it for a bit of fun. It's a little secret code for teasing.
Oh, it's absolutely like it will always be an element of fun and surprise for fans in general. Like I mentioned earlier, that there have always been codes, even like in the promotional material. Assassin's Creed Initiates was like a web platform in 2013 and 14, and it had a lot of codes and messages that like fans came together to understand them and crack them and see where the story could go next. And this could be like a new version of those puzzles. Like this could be a way for the community to come together and see where AC could go next, at least in terms of like first civilization. Absolutely.
Well, I better start brushing up on how to solve it, because I'm dyslexic and I can't solve any word puzzles. Can't even solve crosswords half the time. But I want to be have a massive thank you for you to joining this episode.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure and an honor, and it was so nice to have this kind of discussion.
It was finally nice to have Access The Animus on board. It's like one of my ticks ticked off. The next one is to hunt Darby down and try and get him to claw back some Assassin's Creed just for one episode.
Keep on keeping on. You will get him at some point.
Remember, everybody, to check out Access the Animus on Twitter at Access Animus. I think I've got the Twitter link right.
Yep. Yeah, at Access the Animus.
Oh, it will be in the link description, everyone. So just look in the description and be able to find it. If you want to be a guest on the show or want to have any discussions about what we've discussed today, you can find me on Twitter at AC Let's Talk or email Assassin's Creed Let's Talk at gmail.com. And thank you all for listening, and I'll see you all next week.